year ago, I rented an old wooden cabin deep in a national forest with 3 friends for what was supposed to be a quiet weekend away from the city. And we chose it specifically because it was isolated, cheap, and miles from the nearest paved road. We drove in before sunset, parked beside the cabin, and noticed immediately that there was no cell service, no neighboring lights in the distance, and no security cameras or motion lights around the property. The owner had left a key under a metal box near the door, and inside the cabin, everything looked worn but usable, with thin curtains over the windows and simple locks that clicked but did not feel strong. We cooked dinner, played cards, and joked about how silent the forest was at night, because there were no passing cars and no distant highway noise, just the occasional crack of wood from the fireplace. Around midnight, we locked every door and window, checked them twice, and went to sleep in separate small rooms that all opened into one narrow hallway. At exactly 3:07 a.m., I woke up to a sharp tapping sound against the glass beside my bed, and it was so distinct and rhythmic that it could not have been a random branch brushing the window. I held my breath and listened as the tapping came again. 3 clear knocks spaced evenly apart, and then it stopped long enough for me to think it was over. A second later, the same 3 knocks hit the window in the living room, which was on the opposite side of the cabin. And that was when I realized something was moving around us. I left my room and found my friends already standing in the hallway because they had heard it too. And we stood there silently as the knocks shifted again to the kitchen window. The pattern continued, one window after another, as if someone was deliberately walking the perimeter and striking each pane in turn to let us know they were there. One of my friends whispered that it had to be an animal, but the spacing between each set of knocks was consistent and timed with footsteps we could faintly hear on the gravel outside. We turned off all interior lights so we could see outside more clearly, and the forest beyond the glass was completely dark, with no movement visible in the beam of a single flashlight. The knocking stopped for almost a full minute, and we waited without speaking, listening for any sign that it had ended. Then the back door handle began to rattle slowly, not violently, but with steady pressure, as if someone was testing whether it would give way. The metal latch vibrated against the frame, and we could hear the wood creak under the force, which made it obvious that whoever was outside knew exactly where the doors were located. My friend grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace while I held the flashlight, and together we moved toward the back entrance, staying a few feet away from the door. The rattling stopped the moment we approached, and the silence that followed felt intentional, like whoever was outside had stepped aside to wait for our next move. Against our better judgment, we decided to open the door quickly and shine the flashlight out into the yard, because staying inside without knowing felt worse than confronting it. we swung the door open. Cold air rushed in, and the beam of light swept across the ground, revealing damp soil and gravel, but no visible footprints or figure in sight. We stepped out together, scanning the tree line carefully, and saw nothing but dense trunks and low branches that blocked most of the moonlight. As we walked a few feet from the cabin, the front door slammed shut behind us with force, and we all spun around at the same time. We ran back immediately, but the door was locked from the inside, and we heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the wooden floor. My friend shouted through the door while pounding on it, and from inside came 3 slow knocks against the front window, directly behind the glass. That's when I thought it was over. I had no idea what was about to happen next. The story isn't over. Subscribe the channel to continue. Then continue seamlessly with. We circled the cabin desperately, checking every window for an opening. And that was when we noticed that the lights inside had turned on one by one, as if someone was moving from room to room. Through the thin curtain of the living room window, I saw a dark outline pass across the wall, and it was tall enough that it could not have been one of us reflected in the glass. We shouted that we were outside and demanded whoever was inside to leave. But the only response was the sound of our bedroom doors being opened and slammed in sequence. The dragging noise resumed, louder this time, and it moved from the hallway toward the front entrance, as though something heavy was being positioned deliberately. One of my friends ran to the side window and managed to lift it a few inches, and the moment he did, the interior lights went off instantly, plunging the cabin back into darkness. We froze, listening, and then the same 3 knocks came from the inside of the wall, directly beside the window he had just touched. He dropped the frame in shock, and we heard rapid footsteps moving across the floor toward the back of the cabin. Realizing we had no safe way back in, we decided to run to the car and use its headlights to illuminate the entire yard, hoping that whoever was inside would reveal themselves or flee. As we reached the vehicle, we discovered that all 4 tires had been slashed cleanly along the sides, and the cuts were too precise to be accidental damage from the road. The sight of the ruined tires confirmed that whoever was targeting us had arrived before we woke up and had planned to trap us there. We backed away from the car slowly, staying together, and that was when the cabin door opened quietly behind us. The figure stepped out holding the iron poker we had left inside, and even in the dim light, I recognized the jacket of the property owner who had handed us the rental instructions earlier that day. He walked toward us calmly, explaining that he preferred privacy on his land, and that visitors who ignored certain unwritten rules did not always leave. One of my friends tried to run toward the tree line, but the owner lunged forward and struck him across the back, knocking him to the ground before we could react. The rest of us scattered instinctively, but but the forest was dense and uneven, and within seconds, I heard another impact followed by a body hitting the dirt. I hid behind a fallen log and watched as he dragged one of my friends back toward the cabin. Using the same slow pulling sound we had heard earlier, the dragging continued inside, and the door closed again, leaving the yard silent except for distant rustling in the trees. I stayed hidden for hours until the first light of morning, and when the sun rose high enough to reveal the yard clearly, the cabin door was open, and there was no sign of my friends outside. I walked back toward the road on foot for nearly 6 miles until I found a ranger station, and I reported only that we had been attacked at the cabin without explaining the knocks or the way he had circled us. By the time anyone returned with me, the cabin had been emptied of our belongings, cleaned thoroughly, and the owner was gone, along with any evidence that could prove what happened during the night. 2 of my friends were never seen again, and the third survived with injuries that left him unable to speak clearly about what he witnessed inside. I sold my car, moved to another state, and I have never stepped into a remote cabin since that night, because I know exactly what was circling us at 3 in the morning. The knocks were not random. The silence was not accidental. And the man who rented us that cabin had already decided how the night would end before we even arrived. One last question. If you were in her place at that moment, would you have done the same? Be honest. What does her choice deserve out of 10? Subscribe now. The best story is coming next.